Book 2. Chapter 3. Dead Leaves Dancing. A roiling cloud of black smoke billowed from the ranch house roof, casting an ominous shadow over the blood-spattered yard. Broken furniture and scattered weapons painted a grim picture of the recent violence. Morthal's face, streaked with soot and sweat, betrayed the weight of command as he surveyed the scene. Beside him, Zira's usually immaculate appearance was marred by ash and grime, while Elara's elfin features were darkened by both smoke and grim determination. The decision before them carried the weight of lives. The heat licked at their faces as flames devoured the wooden structure, each crackling timber a countdown to disaster. Inside, survivors might still draw breath, or so they hoped.
We can't risk it.
Zira pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, breath hitching with the smoke.
If we waste time trying to save the building, those people will die.
Morthal's jaw clenched as he weighed their options, his training warring with his conscience. A tactical part of him knew they might save both, the building and its occupants, if they could control the flames. But failure would mean condemning those inside to a horrific death. His hand tightened around his holy symbol as he sought Helm's guidance.
Time's wasting,
Doreen cut in, her eyes darting between the flames and the ranch house's entrance. There was something calculating in her gaze that went beyond mere concern for survivors.
Whatever people might be in there won't last long in that inferno.
The tension crackled like flames as Morthal searched each face before him. Finally, he nodded, shoulders settling under the burden of command.
We go in now. The building can be rebuilt. Lives cannot.
Split up,
Elara added quietly, already moving toward the cellar entrance. They plunged into the burning structure, hacking and coughing as the smoke assaulted their lungs. The flames clawed along the walls with ravenous appetite, turning the once peaceful ranch house into a maze of fire and shadow. As they separated, Doreen's quick fingers brushed against her belt pouches, ready for more than just rescue work. Upstairs, Morthal's boots pounded against the creaking floorboards, his shield raised against falling debris as he kicked open door after door. Empty bedrooms greeted him, their contents strewn about in the wake of the Orish raid. Overturned furniture, shattered mirrors, torn bedding. Each vacant room tightened the knot of dread in his stomach. Through the thick smoke, he caught glimpses of Doreen's lithe form slipping into the study, the only room she'd chosen to search. The selective nature of her rescue efforts wasn't lost on him. When Doreen emerged, coughing into her sleeve, something distinctly bulged beneath her leather armor. Their eyes met through the haze, his stern and knowing, hers carefully neutral despite the obvious theft. Morthal's jaw clenched, words of condemnation rising in his throat. But the choking fumes and the weight of their primary mission stilled his tongue. There would be time for moral lectures later, assuming they survived this inferno.
Nothing?
He asked instead, his voice rough with smoke and disapproval. Doreen shook her head, careful to keep her expression appropriately grave.
No survivors,
She managed between coughs, though her hand unconsciously strayed to the hidden bulge in her armor.
Not in this room, anyway.
In the basement, smoke seeped through the ceiling boards like ghostly fingers, a deadly reminder that the inferno above was spreading. Elara's keen elven eyes cut through the shadows, catching a slight movement in the corner. There, slumped against the cold stone wall, sat a man, his face a canvas of purple bruises and dried blood, wrists raw from struggling against his bonds. The man's good eye fixed on them through the gloom, blazing with defiance despite his condition.
Damn orcs,
He growled, voice like gravel.
when I get my hands on 'em, I swear by every god.
A wet cough interrupted his threat, but the hatred in his voice remained undiminished. Elara crouched swiftly, his blades making quick work of the ropes. Above them, the house groaned ominously.
We're getting you out of here. Now.
His quiet urgency carried the weight of experience. He'd seen people trapped in burning buildings before. The rancher struggled to his feet, swaying but refusing help. Blood trickled from a gash in his side, and his left leg barely took weight, but his eyes burned with the same fire consuming his home. Zyra stepped forward, smoke wreathing her form.
Are you Big Al Calazorn?
The man spat blood to the side, giving her an appraising look.
Yeah, and who the hell are you lot supposed to be?
Your rescuers,
Balin muttered, already moving toward the stairs. They half-carried, half-dragged Big Al up the cellar steps as burning debris rained down around them. The air grew thicker with each step until they finally burst into the blood-stained yard, gulping clean air like drowning men. Al's relief at escape lasted only moments. His eyes swept the carnage before him, landing on each of his fallen farmhands. 5 bodies lay where they had fought and died, men he'd known for years, their final stand marked by broken weapons and orc corpses around them.
Gods, no.
He whispered, his facade cracking.
Jaren, Tuck, all of them.
His legs gave way, and this time he didn't resist when Ilara caught him.
And only Omal made it out? To warn the town?
His voice broke on the last word, rage and grief warring on his battered face. Behind them, the ranch house, his life's work, crackled and roared as flames consumed it completely. Al's fists clenched until his knuckles went white, but there was nothing left to fight, nothing to do but watch as everything he'd built turned to ash, his chosen family lying cold in the yard around him.
Bastards!
He spat, the word carrying decades of lost dreams.
Thieving, murdering bastards.
In the deepening dusk, 6 fresh graves stood as silent testimony to the tragedy. Morthal stepped forward, his armor still stained with smoke, and raised his holy symbol.
We gather here to honor these fallen brothers,
He began, his usual commanding voice faltering.
May Helm guide their spirits to...
He paused, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool evening air.
As it is written in the...
The silence stretched painfully as liturgical phrases escaped him.
We commit these souls to their final rest.
He tried again.
May they find peace in...
Big Al pushed himself up with a grunt, his injuries forgotten in the moment. He laid a calloused hand on Morthal's armored shoulder.
Thank you, friend,
He said quietly.
but let me speak for my people.
With gentle firmness, he guided the cleric back to the others before taking his place beside the graves, firelight catching on his silver ring as he gestured, a detail that didn't escape Doreen's calculating gaze.
Jaren,
He began, voice thick with emotion.
best horse trainer I ever knew. Used to sing to the colts. Terrible voice, but they loved her anyway. Saved every copper to send her boy to school in Neverwinter.
His voice cracked.
Tommy was supposed to visit next month.
A single tear traced down Zira's cheek as she fought to maintain composure.
Tomas.
Al continued, moving to the next grave.
Called him Old Tom, though he was younger than me. Made the best damned stew you ever tasted. Wouldn't share the recipe. Said it was his grandmother's secret.
A broken laugh escaped him.
Guess it died with him.
Doreen shifted her weight, fingers absently feeding Mr. Mouse. Her eyes darted between the tree line and the setting sun, mentally noting that even burned, the ranch lands would fetch a decent price to the right buyer.
Tuck married Sarah right here on the ranch last spring. Tuck just got a letter from Triboan.
Al's voice finally broke.
They were expecting their first child.
Morthal's head bowed, shame burning in his chest. His prayers felt hollow next to these simple truths, these lives reduced to memories.
And Marcus.
Al's voice grew softer.
Always had that orange cat following him around. Called her Sunset. Fed her from his own plate every night.
He touched the marker.
Haven't seen her since the attack. And Philip. Gods, Philip was just a boy. 17, wanted to be a ranger someday.
Al's fist clenched.
He died driving our cow Petunia away from the ranch. Wouldn't leave her to the orcs.
Zyra's shoulders began to shake, but it wasn't until Al's next words that she broke completely.
They weren't just farm hands.
Al's voice rose, fierce with pride and grief.
They were family, my family, every goddamn one of them, and they died fighting, protecting what we built together.
He turned to face the party, his good eye blazing in the firelight.
Don't you dare remember them as victims. Remember them as heroes.
Zyra sobbed openly now, her composure shattered. Ilara glanced at her, startled by the intensity of her reaction, then hesitantly placed a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was stiff, unpracticed, but genuine. After a moment, he withdrew his hand quickly, surprised by his own instinct to offer comfort. Morthal stood rigid, his earlier fumbled prayers forgotten. This, he realized, was true ceremony, not in ritual or formal words, but in the honest remembrance of lives well lived. As night settled over the graves, the firelight caught the tears on Big Al's cheeks, but his voice never wavered again. He had given his family the farewell they deserved. The night air carried a bitter chill, but the smoldering remains of the ranch house cast more than enough heat to keep them warm as they gathered. The ember light painted their faces in shifting oranges and deep shadows.
What do you know about Wyvern Tor?
Zyra asked, her voice gentle with carefully measured sympathy.
These orcs.
Same tribe, no doubt.
Big Al spat into the darkness.
Been causing trouble all through these parts. Heard they've got some kind of camp up in those caves.
Balin's gravelly voice cut in.
Speaking of trouble, quite a blaze earlier. Amazing how quickly fire can spread when magic's involved.
He cast a pointed look at Zyra. Zyra's fingers clenched in her lap, but she kept her eyes fixed on the dying embers. The memory of Ilara's blood on the ground, the desperate choice she'd made. She pushed it aside, focusing instead on gathering information.
What about Old Al Well?
She pressed.
We heard there might be trouble there too.
Big Al shifted uncomfortably.
Aye, old watchtower ruins. Strange lights at night, they say. Folk gone missing. Undead, if you believe the rumors.
He shook his head.
Haven't been close myself, mind you.
And Agatha?
Zyra leaned forward.
The Banshee.
By the gods, girl, stay away from that one.
Al's good eye widened.
Nothing but death in Connieberry now. Agatha's not some story to scare children. She's real and she's deadly.
What will you do now?
Zyra asked Al, her voice soft with genuine concern. Al's face hardened with determination.
Rebuild. Every bloody board and beam. Won't let those bastards win.
He ran a hand through his graying hair.
Though it'd be easier if I could find my savings. Had a fair amount stashed upstairs in the study. Emergency coin for times like these, ironically enough.
I'm sure you can find it from the ruins.
Zyra offered. Then, almost casually, she glanced at Morthal.
Did you notice any strongbox or coin purse when you were up there?
Morthal's hesitation was subtle but unmistakable.
Nothing.
Zyra's eyes narrowed at his response, unused to hearing anything but brutal honesty from the cleric. The tension in his voice spoke volumes.
Doesn't matter now.
Al sighed, staring at the glowing ruins of his home.
Orcs brought this on us. Whether they swung the blade or lit the flame, they're the ones responsible.
He looked around at their gathered faces, firelight dancing across his determined features.
You lot saved my life. That's what matters. The house, well, A man can rebuild anything with enough determination.
Some might say magical fire.
Balin began, but Al cut him off with a sharp gesture.
I know exactly who to blame, son, and it ain't the ones who came to my rescue.
The conversation lulled into silence, broken only by the occasional pop of cooling timber. Zyra's questions had painted a clear picture of the dangers ahead, but it was the unspoken tensions within their own group that seemed to weigh heaviest in the night air. Moonlight painted silver edges on the fresh graves as Elara found Zyra sitting alone, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, as if holding herself together. The night air still carried the acrid scent of smoke, a reminder of how close they'd all come to joining those beneath the earth.
I failed you.
Elara's voice barely carried above the night sounds as he lowered himself beside her.
I should have been faster, stronger. I should have...
Don't!
Zyra's voice caught in her throat. She couldn't bear to hear him apologize for nearly dying to protect her. Her hand unconsciously moved to her back, where beneath layers of cloth, scales glinted in the moonlight.
You shouldn't have done that. Not for someone like...
The words trailed off into the darkness. She turned to face him, moonlight catching the unshed tears in her eyes.
Why did you do it? Why did you risk your life for...
She couldn't finish, years of self-loathing choking the words. Elara's eyes turned to stare the embers, and for a moment she saw such raw pain in his face that it stole her breath.
Because you deserve a chance to live,
he said with quiet intensity.
Because no one,
his voice cracked slightly,
no one should die alone and afraid.
Zyra felt tears welling up, hot and shameful. If only he knew what she was.
I'm not worth...
I've seen who you are.
Elara cut in and turned his gaze back to Zira's eyes, his quiet voice carrying unexpected steel.
I've watched you help strangers without reward. I've seen you risk your life to protect others. Whatever darkness you think defines you, Zyra, your actions speak louder.
In the darkness, Zira's tears fell freely, silent tracks down her cheeks. She wanted to believe him, wanted desperately to deserve the faith he showed in her. But the truth of her nature weighed heavy, a secret that seemed to grow more burdensome with each act of kindness she received.
Thank you,
she whispered, the words strange and delicate on her tongue. For a moment they just sat in silence, accepting the comfort of not being alone. Dawn painted the horizon in shades of amber as they bid farewell to Big Al, leaving him among the ashes of Butterskull Ranch. His warnings about Agatha hung heavy in the air as they set out toward Conyberry, their wagon creaking beneath supplies and tension. The ruined village appeared through morning mist like a graveyard of homes. They concealed the wagon behind crumbling walls, the horses nickering nervously at the unnatural stillness that permeated the air. Ancient oaks loomed overhead, their gnarled branches weaving a canopy that seemed to watch their every move with malevolent intent.
We can't just blunder in there like common sellswords,
Zyra announced, pulling her travel pack from the wagon.
Agatha may be dead, but she was once nobility. She deserves proper respect.
Balin's derisive snort cut through the eerie silence.
The dead don't care about pretty dresses, girl.
No.
Zyra arched an eyebrow as she withdrew an elegantly embroidered gown of midnight blue.
Then you clearly haven't spent much time among the nobility, living or dead.
She disappeared behind the wagon to change.
We're wasting daylight,
Balin growled, pacing between twisted tree trunks. Each step sent dead leaves scattering.
Every minute we delay is another minute something could go wrong.
When Zyra emerged, she looked refreshed and wore a clean dress. She worked a wooden brush through her hair with practiced strokes, each movement deliberate and refined.
Patience, Balin. When dealing with a banshee, proper etiquette might mean the difference between success and a screaming death.
Morthal watched the exchange with quiet consideration.
She's right. We're not here to fight. We're here to negotiate.
Negotiate with the dead,
Balin muttered, but his hand never strayed far from his sword hilt.
What's next? Tea parties with trolls?
Zira finished her preparations, every detail carefully attended to despite their grim surroundings. The contrast between her polished appearance and the decaying ruins around them was striking, perhaps exactly the effect she intended.
Ready?
Elara asked softly, his keen eyes scanning the increasingly dark woods ahead. Zira nodded.
As ready as one can be to pay a social call on a banshee.
Her light tone barely masked the tension beneath. They all knew Big Al's warnings weren't just tavern tales. Agatha had killed before, and would likely kill again. The clearing materialized like a wound in the forest's heart, unnaturally still save for dead leaves dancing on a cold breeze. Zira led the way toward the dilapidated hut, each step measured and careful. Elara kept pace at her side, scanning the shadows with quiet vigilance. The rest of their companions trailed some 10 paces behind, shifting nervously in the eerie silence. Suddenly, Agatha appeared, her ethereal form wavering between solid and mist. The temperature plummeted. She retained echoes of elven nobility, high cheekbones, elegant bearing, twisted now by death and malice.
Why do the living disturb my rest?
Her voice resonated with centuries of solitude and spite. Morthal stepped forward, holy symbol raised.
Blessed helm, grant us.
The banshee's form contorted, shadows writhing around her like living darkness. Her shriek sent Doreen and Balin stumbling backward, terror etched across their faces. Zira spun on her heel and shouted,
Stop! Morthal, for the love of Helm! Stand down!
She inhaled sharply, then faced the phantom, forcing grace into every movement despite her trembling hands.
Oh, magnificent Agatha! We have not come to harm you. We only seek knowledge. We beg your forgiveness for our priest's misguided attempt at prayer.
She cleared her throat delicately.
We bring an offering for your beauty.
She continued, producing a silver comb that caught what little light penetrated the gloom.
A fine offering, though nothing could truly match your splendor.
Agatha's fury subsided to cold interest. Her spectral form drifted closer, examining the gift with greed in her eyes.
Speak your purpose, mortal.
Zira stood her ground. Her mind raced with questions about Wave Echo Cave, about the mysterious black spider. But thoughts of Garael steadied her resolve. Sweet Garael, who still didn't know what kind of monster she truly was. Perhaps, Zira thought, if she could just complete this task, prove herself useful. She swallowed her personal curiosity.
I seek to know who received Bowgentle's spellbook from your hands.
Surprise flickered across Agatha's ethereal features, followed by something like bitter amusement.
The name that will haunt your dreams.
Agatha's voice echoed through the clearing.
The master of the journal, the architect of your quest.
She circled in front of them like mist, each statement hanging in the cold air.
A man who fancied himself a collector of power, one who wrapped himself in stolen legacies and ancient claims, buying secrets with gold and blood. I remember his shadow darkening these woods.
Her spectral form flickered with barely contained malice.
The name you are looking for is Cernoth of Iriabor, though I doubt he still uses it. Now, leave the tribute, then go.
Elara shifted forward, clearly intending to press for more, but Agatha's form swelled with terrible warning. Her scream filled the clearing, not just with sound, but with primal terror that clawed at their souls. They all turned and fled through the twisted forest, dignity forgotten, branches whipping at their faces. Zyra's elegant gown caught on thorns as she ran, but she didn't slow. Only when they reached the wagon did they stop, gasping for breath, the banshee's scream still echoing in their minds.
Well,
Zyra managed between heaving breaths, smoothing her torn dress with shaking hands.
at least we got what we came for.
What she didn't say was how much it meant that she could return to Garaele with success. Something good, something helpful to counter the terrible secret she still carried. Perhaps small acts of service could begin to balance the scales, even if she could never truly deserve the kindness she'd found in Phandalin. The journey through Misty Vale brought 3 days of deceptive peace. During First Watch, Zira and Doreen sat in loaded silence, the weight of unspoken grievances hanging between them. Zira still bristled at the memory of Doreen's words in Phandalin, while Doreen nursed her own resentment over being abandoned to the orcs, despite her attempts to prove her loyalty. As evening settled on their 3rd day, the women retreated to their tent, a recent acquisition that had proven its worth. Zyra ran her fingers along the sturdy canvas with obvious appreciation.
I must say, Doreen, this was brilliant forethought on your part,
she said, beginning her nightly routine of unpinning her hair.
The warmth alone is worth every copper.
Doreen snorted, unlacing her boots.
Wasn't doing it for comfort. Just didn't want those perverts getting an eyeful while we're changing.
Zyra paused mid-brush stroke, genuine confusion crossing her face.
Perverts? But they're perfect gentlemen. Ilara would sooner die than speak. Balin's practically a monk, and Morthal...
She laughed softly.
Morthal probably sleeps in his armor.
Men are men,
Doreen muttered darkly, though there was something almost fond in her cynicism. Outside, where Morthal stood his watch, their voices carried clearly through the canvas. He cleared his throat loudly.
I'll have you know that before Helm. We are all naked.
There was a beat of silence, then he added with attempted wisdom,
Spiritually speaking, of course.
Morthal!
Zyra's scandalized gasp was followed by Doreen's bark of laughter.
See?
Doreen called out.
Perverts, the lot of them.
From somewhere near the campfire, Balin's gruff voice added,
Some of us are trying to sleep without thinking about Morthal being spiritually naked. Thank you very much.
Dawn of their 3rd travel day revealed Old Owl Well, its ancient watchtower rising from the hilltop like a broken bone-piercing skin. Smoke from a bonfire curled skyward, and metallic clinging echoed from within the structure. As they drew closer, more details emerged through the morning mist. A crimson tent nestled against the tower's base, and 2 figures standing unnaturally still near the flames. The shambling gait and rotting flesh marked them unmistakably as undead.
Helm, guide our blades.
Morthal whispered, but even this soft prayer was enough to alert the dead. The zombies' hollow eyes fixed upon them, beginning their relentless approach. The party reacted instantly. Doreen's arrows whistled through the air, embedding themselves in putrid flesh. Ilara charged forward, blades glinting in the early light. Morthal's spectral warhammer materialized with a crack of divine energy, while Zyra's firebolt seared through the morning chill. Despite arrows protruding from its chest, scorch marks across its face, and the impact of divine force, the first zombie stumbled onward. Then the tent's entrance parted. The figure that emerged commanded attention, not through size or strength, but through an aura of calculated power. Scarlet robes rippled with arcane symbols that seemed to move of their own accord. Intricate tattoos adorned his bare scalp, marking him as something far more dangerous than the mindless undead at his command. Ilara's sharp intake of breath drew Zira's attention. She'd never seen such naked fear on the warrior's face, his normally steady hands trembling around his sword hilts.
Thorn!
He breathed, the name falling from his lips like a curse. The Red Wizard's thin smile never reached his eyes.
Well,
He said, voice smooth as poisoned honey.
this is unexpected.